Hey everyone, so it's been a while since we last did a deck profile, and I figure I might as well do this deck profile since it recently got some new support, and I've been playing this deck for a while now, and I think this is the build that I'm really happy with at the moment. Haven't had to make any changes for a while with this, so yeah, this is the first time showcasing this, so let's just get on with it. Alright, so to begin, we're playing 3 copies of Metaphys Ragnarok, and this card's basically your main card. It's the only tuner in your deck. If it's summoned in any way, you just banish the top 3 cards of your deck, and it gains 300 for each of your banished Metaphys monsters from this effect. So potentially it can be at 2400. And if it inflicts damage through battle, then special summon one level 5 or higher Metaphys monster from your deck, but banish it during the end phase of the next turn. So it's definitely really good. It is a hard once per turn, so what this means is if you use the effect once, you can't do it again on the second one. But overall, it is still a very powerful card, and I am really liking this card so far. The next card we're playing is Metaphys Daedalus. We're playing 3 of this. This card is also just as good as Ragnarok, because if it's special summoned by the effect of a Metaphys monster, banish all other face-up special summon monsters on the field. Reason why this is really good is because if you have your other special summon Metaphys monsters on the field, it will also banish them off Daedalus's effect. Reason why that's actually good is because, again, all your Metaphys monsters actually benefit off being banished, except for Ragnarok, of course, but every other Metaphys monster in your deck will have an effect during the next standby phase if it is banished. So, its banished effect is, if banished during the next standby phase of the next turn, you can shuffle this banished card into the deck and then banish one Metaphys monster from your deck except itself. So that's basically one of the main perks of this particular deck, is that they can all actually shuffle themselves back into the deck, which means you are most likely never going to deck out because you always have resources. Of course, for this particular one, it just swaps out one, but overall, definitely allows you to manage your resources really easily here, and I definitely like what this deck can actually do. Alright, so for the next one, we're playing 3 copies of Metaphys Nephthys. Again, if special summoned by the effect of a Metaphys monster, you can banish all set spells and traps on the field. So that's basically a common effect, is aside from Ragnarok, all the Metaphys monsters will have an effect when special summoned by the effect of a Metaphys monster. Now you can clearly see how important Ragnarok actually is to the deck now. And aside from that, aside from Ragnarok, all the other Metaphys monsters also have the effect of, if they're banished during the next standby phase of the next turn, they get an effect. So its banished effect is, you can actually shuffle this into the deck and then add a Metaphys monster, actually any Metaphys card from your deck to your hand except itself. So again, this sets you up for a few plays as well, and there are several combos where if you have multiple of these all banished, you can actually trigger off some really powerful combos that can actually wipe off pretty much your opponent's entire board, so it's really awesome to see that. One thing you also have to keep in mind is both these effects here, they're not once per turn. So that means if they come out through the special summon effect, or if they're actually in the banished, they can actually trigger off multiple times. So even if you have 3 Nephthys banished, basically you can shuffle back all 3 and just add any 3 Metaphys cards from your deck to your hand, which makes this deck actually really viable, and without any restrictions, it definitely makes it for a deck worth playing. So we're only playing 2 Metaphys Tyrant Dragon. This card, if special summon, it's unaffected by trap cards, so it's not that big of a deal, but it does avoid evenly matched, which is really awesome. Also, if it attacks a monster, it can also make a second attack in a row. Its banished effect. You can also shuffle this back into the deck and then special summon a Metaphys monster from your hand, but banish it during the end phase of the next turn. So this card can also trigger off the special summon of Nephthys and Daedalus, obviously triggering their effects again. So yes, Ragnarok isn't the only one that can special summon other Metaphys monsters. Tyrant Dragon's also just as important. But overall, given its own special summoning effect isn't as worthwhile as the other two, we're only playing 2 of them. Next, we're playing 3 copies of Metaphys Decoy Dragon. So this is the new support from Cybernetic Horizon. A really good card. So its pendulum effect is when your monster is targeted for an attack, you can target one of your Metaphys monsters that is banished or even in your graveyard, and then banish this card if you do special summon that target in attack position. And you can only use this effect once per turn. As for the monster effect, when your monster is targeted for an attack, target one of your Metaphys monsters that's banished or in your graveyard. Banish this card if you do special summon that target. During the standby phase of the next turn, after this card was banished, you can special summon this banished card. You can only use each effect of Metaphys Decoy Dragon once per turn. So overall, it is a hard once per turn, but it is a very, very good card, and this is a support that's definitely really good. It actually extends the deck so much. Like, the deck was already good enough without Decoy Dragon, but adding him in actually makes it really viable as well. The interesting thing is, Metaphys Decoy Dragon's actually a level 2 monster, and Ragnarok is a level 4 tuner. So technically you can actually go into Metaphys Horus as well, which is the level 6. Sadly, I don't actually have the card because it's actually increased in price. Now, this particular deck is more so a deck I play for fun, but overall, I wouldn't play the next card. You guys don't actually have to play it. I just play it because, again, this deck is more so playing for fun, and yeah, I'm playing one Metaphys Executor. Metaphys Executor it's not the best card, really. I mean, its summoning conditions are not particularly easy, and it's pretty pricey because you have to banish 5 Metaphys cards with different names from your graveyard or face up on the field, and it can't be normal summoned or set, so really difficult conditions to bring out, but overall it's just a fun card I want to bring out. Can't be destroyed or banished by card effects. Once per turn, if your opponent controls more cards than you do, you can target one of your banished Metaphys monsters, special summon it, but banish it during the end phase of the next turn. So again, I'm just putting one of them in there because I play a lot of casual games with my friends, so this is something I just put in there. But you can easily take it out, put in so much better cards in there, so up to you. For the non-Metaphys monsters, we're playing 2 copies of Eat of Millions. I have thought about playing 3. You could just take out the Executor and put in a third one, but overall, this card is it just does the job. It's good enough as it is. It just helps you deal with cards that are difficult to get rid of in terms of attacks. So overall, Eat of Millions definitely helps us deal with that. We're also playing 2 copies of Necrophase here, so this is a foreign copy, of course, but basically Necrophase is an amazing card because as soon as it gets banished, I just banished the top 5 cards of your deck and your opponent's deck, but the thing is, you benefit off it because you have mostly Metaphys cards that are getting banished. On top of that, if he is normal summoned, you just shuffle back all your banished cards into your deck, so overall, you have a very good chance of actually recovering everything again, and it's a great way to just recycle your resources, and it just keeps the cycle going. You'll never really deck out, you'll never really run out of resources, you're always in a good position with this deck. For the final monster, we're playing 1 copy of Fairy Tale Snow, just because some of these Metaphys cards can end up in the graveyard, and there's no way to actually bring them back into the deck aside from Necrophase, but in that case, they would actually have to be banished. So what do? We use Fairy Tale Snow to actually banish them, so that some of them can actually get their effects, or we can just use it to banish even Necrophase, and Necrophase will obviously bring back everything back into the deck again. So really good card, Snow, and also the fact that it just flips a face-up monster your opponent controls to face-down defense is definitely a really good card extender, great way to defend yourself here. Alright, so moving on to spells, we're playing 3 copies of Asa Metaphys. This card's actually really amazing. I actually played this card wrong for so long, and I didn't realize how good it actually was. So basically, once per turn, you can banish a Metaphys card from your hand if you do draw a card. So any Metaphys card, even the spells and traps, And it's banish, not discard, so that means all your Metaphys monsters will trigger off their effects. And you just draw a card. It's just a really, really good card. And on top of that, it has the other effects where if it's during your turn, one of your Metaphys cards is banished, then all monsters on the field lose 500 attack and defense except for Metaphys monsters. And during your opponent's turn, you can change the battle positions of all monsters on the field except Metaphys monsters. So it definitely provides both offensive and defensive plays, as well as a great way to manage your resources. And again, I can't stress this enough that this deck is one of the best decks for managing resources here. It's really good. The only downside to this card is that it is a mandatory effect. So if one of your cards actually does get banished, the effect triggers off whether your opponent has monsters on the board or not. So that's kind of unfortunate. The other thing that's unfortunate is that it does stack if you have multiple of these on the field. So if you have an Asa Metaphys, 2 of them on the field, and it's your opponent's turn and you want to change the battle positions, the minute one card is banished, one of them will trigger, flipping your opponent's monsters to defense, but then the other one will flip it back to attack again. So overall, it's not great to play multiple of these. You do have to actually think properly what you actually want to utilize this card for, or what matters to you. We're playing 2 copies of the field spell Metaphys Factor. I've seen many deck profiles that actually doesn't play this card. I'm actually very surprised. This card is actually really amazing. Each turn, 1 level 5 or higher Metaphys monster you normal summon can be summoned without tributing, but banish it during the end phase of the next turn. However, that's already good enough, but the thing is, it has an additional effect. The additional effect is your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to your Metaphys monster's effect activations. Pretty much meaning you'll always get your effects going off, which is definitely really powerful. Metaphys Factor is basically a way to lock out your opponents from actually negating your monster's effects. I play 2 of them. I might even play more just to prove a point that it's a really amazing card. I've seen so many decks that don't even bother mentioning this card, don't even bother playing it, but surprisingly it's actually really, really good. I'm trying out a new tech. We're playing 1 Crossbreed. This card allows you to banish 2 cards from your hand and or face up on the field with the same original type and attribute with different names. Add one monster with the same original type and attribute as those monsters, but with a different name from your deck to your hand. You can only activate this card once per turn, which is why I only play 1 of them. It's a interesting tech to help banish off your Metaphys monsters so that their effects will trigger off next turn. Just a great way to really extend your plays and do more things. This card came out in Cybernetic Horizon, and I definitely think it's a good card worth playing. Alright, so moving on, we're playing 2 copies of Trade-In. We have 5 targets. We have Tyrant Dragons and we have Nephthys. Sadly, Daedalus is a level 7, so you could actually play 7 Sacred Sword of 7 stars. However, I do think that Trade-In is definitely a card worth playing. If I actually have a copy of Sacred Sword of 7 stars, then I definitely would actually play one of those and take out the Executor. It's just a great way to draw cards and to speed up things. Alright, so we're playing 1 copy of Dimensional Fissure, basically just to help banish more of your Metaphys monsters to accelerate their banish effects and make the most out of it. And of course, your opponent will really just lose out on this. They rarely do benefit off this. If they do, you can always just side it out. But overall, this card's just a great card to play in your deck to help you extend your things and also prevent your opponent from doing things in the graveyard. We're also playing 2 copies of Gold Sarcophagus. Again, I might take out the Executor in a more competitive build and add in a 3rd Gold Sarcophagus, because I can't stress to you enough how important Necrophase actually is in the banish zone, and how important it is to actually get it back to your hand, because if both Necrophases are banished without the use of Gold Sarcophagus, they can never return to your hand. As a result, you are actually in risk of actually decking out. So overall, Gold Sarcophagus is definitely a really important card that you best hope you can actually draw into. So yes, I am highly thinking about getting into a 3rd copy of that as well. And for the last spell, we're playing a Reasoning, just an interesting tech I'm actually testing out here. simply because we have so many different levels, and if any of them go to the graveyard, it doesn't really matter. And if you activate Reasoning while you have a Dimensional Fissure, then anything will just get banished anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I actually don't actually know if I can do that, but I think I can. Overall, it's just a fun card to play in the deck. So moving on to traps, we're actually playing 3 copies of the new support Metaphys Ascension. This came out in Cybernetic Horizon. Its effect is discard 1 Metaphys card, draw a card, and then banish 1 Metaphys monster from your deck. But it's mostly for the second effect, where if this card is actually banished, you can just add any Metaphys card from your deck to your hand except itself. This effect can only be used once per turn. But it's still a really amazing card, and the fact that you can just banish it, like say with as a Metaphys, and then just draw a card, and then on top of that, this chain's allowing you to also add a card as well. It's just a really great card to help speed up the deck and get the pieces you need to actually go off with your combos. Again, not really big combos, but definitely ways to help clear the opponent's board. We're also playing 2 copies of Metaphys Dimension. This card's definitely a really underrated card. I've seen many deck profiles that don't even play this card, just like Metaphys Factor. But of course, it is definitely a card that's worth playing here, and it is more so of a fun deck that I get to test out. But overall, I do find that this card is actually worth playing, even in competitive builds. So if your opponent special summons a monster, except during the damage step, then you can target one of your banished Metaphys monsters and special summon it, but banish it during the end phase of the next turn. If your other Metaphys card in your owner's possession is banished while this card's already face up on the field, then you can target one card your opponent controls and banish it. Each effect can only be used once per turn, but basically it is definitely a really good card to just deal with certain cards that your opponent brings out really quickly. It's a quick response, and overall you could also bring out your own monsters as well, just because your opponent happens to special summon a monster. Alright, so we're nearing the end. We're playing 2 copies of Waterfall of Dragon Souls. This card just allows you to add 1 worm monster from your deck to your hand, and I don't know, it's just a really good card because you can add any of your Metaphys monsters since they're all worms. The second effect I don't use that much, but basically you can send any number of worm-type monsters from your hand or face up on the field to the graveyard, draw cards equal to the number of monsters you send to the graveyard, +1. So great way to draw cards, again, just to get into your Necroface, of course, and it definitely helps out with this deck. To end things off, we're playing 1 copy of Macrocosmos, simply because it doesn't matter if our cards get banished, we play Necroface in a deck. If Necroface was at 3, then we would actually play all 3 of them. And also, the Gold Sarcophagus brings back Necroface. As soon as we summon it, everything that was banished for us gets shuffled back into the deck. Same applies for the opponent, but of course, different scenario, because for us, we benefit so much off this resource, and the fact that we just bring out a powerful Necroface on the board is definitely worth it. Alright, so as for the extra deck, to be honest, you can play anything you want. So I'm actually just going to show you everything I have here in my extra deck. It's completely random, because honestly, I never actually use them aside from the 2 Nightmare monsters I actually have. So I have Nightmare Cerberus and Nightmare Phoenix, which are the 2 most cards that you'll be utilizing. But overall, every other card in your extra deck can be anything you want. Just make sure you have 15, because you're most likely going to banish a few cards for Eater of Millions multiple times, and that's all you want, really. You're never going to go into the extra deck that often, aside from Cerberus and Phoenix, which helps you deal with certain cards your opponent controls. But overall, that's all that really matters for this extra deck. It doesn't really do much else other than use itself for Eater of Millions here. So that's basically it for this deck profile. I do apologize that this video is a lot longer than a lot of my normal deck profiles, but I figure this is my first time doing the deck profile for this Metaphys deck, so I felt like I had to explain a lot more cards. So yeah, tell me what you guys actually think about this. What are you guys actually playing your deck that's really interesting to tech in? But in the meantime, hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.